an important principle in financial planning for me is flexibility. And that's a pretty good rule in general in financial planning. Anytime a provider or a product servicer creates boundaries around getting out of something, it's probably a red flag sign. So if there's surrender charges, if there's upfront fees, pay attention to expenses. Your best return in the stock market, if you look at categories of mutual funds, and there are different asset classes, large cap growth, large cap value. Generally, the mutual funds that have the lowest expense will be higher performers, and the higher expense will be lower performers. It's pretty simple. The higher expenses, the higher the expenses, the more they're taking out of the kitty, and the harder it is to get back to the returns to you and get to their benchmarks. So be very careful with expenses. If you can maintain your flexibility with your money, that's important. Now, sometimes, like a mortgage and buying a house, how are you going to be flexible with that? If you are looking at buying a house and looking for mortgages, how do you make a decision about mortgages? What goes through your mind? Should you take a 30-year fixed, a variable? How do you make decisions like that? You got to develop some framework that's going to make sense to you, okay? And there's so many choices with mortgages, fewer now than there used to be. But it's a transaction. Buying a piece of real estate, buying a house, that's a transaction. And how does the real estate broker get paid? Commission on a transaction, okay? So, beware of how people are paid. Make yourself aware of how any provider you're using is being paid, because the world works on incentives, and you want their incentives to be aligned with yours. It's important to keep your expenses down in all transactions you do. So if you're trying to save money, the cheapest way and most flexible way to save money is something called a Roth IRA. Any of you are lucky enough to have one? Those are great vehicles. Why? So this is after-tax money that you save for retirement. And what are the rules for that deposit? The initial deposit in a Roth. You can deposit $5,500 if you're under 50, $6,500 over. But you can put $100 in there. You can put $25 in there. Can you take that $25 out anytime for anything? You can. That $25 is accessible to you the day after you put it in. The earnings on the $25 is only accessible to you with a penalty. So if you have money in a savings account that's sitting there and you're paying taxes on the interest, even if you're in a low income tax bracket, you can take that money, even if it's part of the money, $100, and move it into a Roth IRA. The money's still accessible to you. It's now earning interest, tax-free forever. And guess what? You erected a barrier again. It says Roth IRA, retirement account. Are you going to go get that money for a frivolous reason to buy, go on a vacation, or buy a new piece of electronics? Probably not, because it says retirement, and there's the voodoo of I don't want to touch that. It works pretty well. However, if you want to pay for your kids' education, you can do that with Roth IRA money, with the original principle. I'm talking about the framework and the psychology of how do I keep myself from spending this money. And when you look at, you mentioned retirement versus other expenses, okay? So the rule about retirement is you cannot borrow for retirement. You got to have a net worth that you can create a stream of income from for retirement. That's essentially what happens. That's why, another reason why your net worth is important in the long run. So if you have the, I guess, good fortune to own a house or bought at the right time, it's not so much, you buy a house because you need a place to live and you can afford to pay the mortgage, okay? The nice thing is it's kind of an automatic savings vehicle. And at the end of the line, after you finish paying off the mortgage, it's an asset that can be sold to fund something like retirement. Of course, you still need a place to live, okay? So, but building your net worth is important because the end result is a successful or a retirement that you can afford, okay? And building your net worth is more likely to happen from the savings side and reducing your spending than from market returns, stock market returns, or even bond market returns. Your leverage is in your ability to spend less and earn more. Probably the greatest financial planning move you can make is enhance your ability to earn a higher income. What's the trade-off? Sometimes higher income work might not be as much fun or as rewarding. But again, if you create a framework that says, you know, if I work and make $100,000 a year for 20 years, you know, I'm 25, and if I can make $100,000 for 20 years, when I'm 45, I can retire and I can volunteer or work in a nonprofit. It's pretty amazing how framing your situation like that and taking control of timelines, because it's amazing what you can tolerate for a year or 6 weeks, as long as you know it's going to end. So savings opportunities, Roth IRA. If you have money sitting in a savings account, earning some small amount of interest, start a Roth IRA if you don't have one. There are income limits. They're pretty high. A single is $110,000, a couple is $185,000. So they're pretty high. So Roth IRAs are available for most people. How many of you have 401k plans at work or some kind of retirement plan? Okay. How many of you are participating? Good. How many of you are participating up to the match that the company's given you? Because that's the idea. So that's why I'm saying if you, tonight, if you go out and you put $100 in your Roth IRA or start one, then you've made a big first step or a reasonable first step that can be built on. You know, the rest is kind of up to you and your ability to maintain that behavior change. So I mentioned about targeted savings, you know, having all the different accounts for all your different goals. That's really important. It really works pretty well. So developing a financial plan in general, I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about how that works. The foundation of a financial plan is cash flow. And I talked about budgeting and spending. Obviously, the first step is to make sure you're not negative cash flow. You're not spending more than you're earning. But that's clearly not going to get you to any of your savings goals. You have to think about how you can have skin in the game. How you have skin in the game in financial planning is setting up goals, beginning to save money, and take control of your behavior.